everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack, and today there are a couple of things that you're going to say. The first, I think, is, Jack, you absolute moron, what are you doing comparing two completely different cars? Well, there is some method to my madness. Before that, just want to apologise for the sunglasses, but the sun is straight ahead. I had to borrow them from the lovely chap who brought this amazing E-Type. But let's get on with it. So first of all, you are absolutely right to say that these cars are completely different. Let's go over that and then I'll tell you why I still want to compare them today. So first of all, this incredible E-Type. This is a 1964, but it's one of the last with a 3.8 engine before they moved to the 4.2. It is in absolutely spectacular condition. Now, when they were launched, these had 265 horsepower from the inline 6 3.8 litre engine. It's a car that weighs 1,400 kilos, capable of 150 miles an hour, 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds. It's a unibody, which means an X-frame at the front holding the engine, which is then bolted onto the body tub chassis. Independent suspension front and rear, discs all round, and torsion beam suspension at the front, which is quite an odd choice considering how advanced the rest of the car was. Let's move over now to the dainty little Alfa. Now this is a 1600cc, 110 horsepower engine, top speed is 110 miles an hour, 0 to 60, 10 seconds compared to 6.5. So you can see already there's a marked difference between the two. This is a monocoque construction, independent front suspension with coil springs, but a solid axle at the back, and discs all round as well. So on the surface, two very different cars, but I think I'm going to shock you here. The prices for both cars around the time when these were launched, this is a 69, but it's still the same car as the first that were launched in 66. So if we take 66 as a base for the E-Type and for the Duetto, they were the same price. So around £4,000 for both cars. Now that is shocking in many ways. I think that this seems like so much more car. But is it really? You have to remember that back in the day, Alfa Romeo was an incredibly prestigious brand. And this actually was very advanced for its time. Discs all round, 5-speed gearbox, which actually trumps the 4-speed on that. Okay, it has the solid rear axle, but all alloy engine as well, so quite a light engine. This has a cast iron block and an alloy head. Although they seem so different during this video, please do bear in mind that if you're an up-and-coming young man back in the mid-60s and you wanted a convertible and you had that sort of budget, you would have had to pick between these two very cars. So if you took them out for a test drive, how would they have felt? Let's find out. Now my own Sprite didn't have a seatbelt, so once you get used to it, it's okay. But initially, when you sort of strap in, it is a bit odd. This E-Type, I've already driven it around a little bit. Oh, still trying to get used to the gears, but I've already driven it around a little bit, and it is an absolutely fabulous thing. It's just such an amazing, lovely car. Not only does it look absolutely incredible, but the interior as well. This one was restored by Moss Jaguar in 2016, and it looks like they did an absolutely amazing job because it just looks faultless to me. Really incredible. So it only has 4 gears, the E-Type, which is one area where it falls a little bit behind the Alfa. Out of habit, I always try and sort of push left before I put it into first, but with this gearbox, you actually have to just push it straight up and it will go into first gear. This has a later gearbox, so it's got the all synchro box from the 4.2 as opposed to the earlier gearboxes, which only had synchro in second, third and fourth. This is definitely one of those cars that transports you right back to the 60s and 70s. You've got that straight 6 at the front, which sounds absolutely glorious, but quite refined. It's not at all raucous. You know it's there, but it's not too loud. Driving position, quite reclined. It's not bad. For me, height-wise, I'm a little bit too tall for this car, so I can already feel that my head is in the breeze there, but at least I'm not in a coupe where I would really struggle for room. I don't even know if there's much point talking about the looks of these cars because they are just so perfect. It is said that Enzo Ferrari, when he saw it at launch, said it was the most beautiful car in the world. I'm not sure there's any proof for that, but I can definitely see why he would have said it if he did, because they are stunningly beautiful things. How Jaguar managed to make this thing for the money that they charged at the time also is completely beyond me. I just don't understand how it was possible. Okay, let's just try and give it a bit of a tickle and see how it goes up the road. What an absolutely glorious, glorious thing this is. It's just incredible. That engine sounds lovely. When you go up through the revs a little bit, intake noise starts to take over from the exhaust noise. It's got a lovely sort of, it's like a little trumpet noise going through it. Now it is a big heavy car, and at slow speeds, or relatively heavy for the time, at slow speeds you can feel that. But as you speed up on these bends, it's better than I thought it was going to be. The steering is very, very slow, but it's positive. If you go a bit too quick, it does lean quite a lot. But once it's settled, you can kind of push it through the corner. What a glorious thing this is. Gear change takes a bit of getting used to, but the action is really lovely. You just have to get a bit of a feel for where the gears are. Once you do, fantastic. The brakes on this have been uprated. They're better than standard. They're still not brilliant, to be quite honest with you, but brakes were a known weak point in those days. Now you can tell it wasn't really built to be a sports car, more of a very, very quick Grand Tourer. And the engine, even by today's standard, feels quite sprightly. It's definitely revvy though. I think the 4.2s had more low down torque. This is an engine that you do have to work it to get the best out of it, but perhaps that makes it even more fun. Yeah, when you go too quick, it starts to move around the road a little bit more than you'd like. I think it's on the original size tyres as well, so comfort over grip. Still feels like there is a fair amount of grip here. There's a little tight corner. You could, even at those speeds, it was giving me messages that the back end might have started to move out. So not a huge amount of grip, but that's not what this is all about. This Jag is a really impressive thing. I didn't think I'd like it quite as much as I do. The interior is fabulous. I love the old switchgear. It's got a real sense of occasion and luxury in it. Not just that, but it does drive well. It's not the most agile thing in the world, and it's a bit wallowy in the bends if you try and use it too much as a sports car. But it still drives incredibly well, and for a convertible like this, you don't, obviously I haven't been pushing it, but you don't necessarily feel the chassis wobbling too much. There's not a huge amount of scuttle shake that's obvious in any case. And the engine is supremely amazing. It's just so, it's got torque low down, it's smooth, but it's revvy, and that is just lovely. Such a nice thing. Let's do another quick pull in this because it deserves it. My God, this car must have been simply a rocket ship at the time. Steering is quite vague off center, which again I think is a result of the tires and other factors, but you don't expect this to be scalpel sharp anyway, do you? Or if you do, you've got the wrong car. Now, fantastic car though this is, there are a couple of faults and a couple of niggles. The driving position, for example, the steering wheel is tilted forward, but also to the side, which is very bizarre. The pedal box similarly put off to the side, and the pedals are all quite tightly bunched. So if someone with big feet like me, it's a bit of a challenge. Also, my legs are scrunched up when you have the wheel where you want it. But despite all that, you'd forgive this car almost anything. It is so glorious. Okay, let's get into the Duetto, or Duetto, the little Alfa Spider, and see how that compares. I already know it's going to be a completely different experience, but that's kind of the point of this test. Two manufacturers from two different countries taking an entirely different approach. So this Duetto is very, very different to the E-Type, but not only as a car, but also as a classic, because that E-Type has been super restored, super clean, perfect car. This is a genuine sort of patina car. It's a car that's lived, and the owner is quite happy to sort of keep it running, keep it original, without worrying too much about getting it to be pristine. Now the gear change has a little bit of a distracting rattle there, but it's just coming from the gear stick, from the top of the gear stick itself. So it's not a big deal, but it can be a bit distracting. Straight away, one of the big differences is in the driving position. It's perhaps not perfect, but for an Italian car of this era, it's definitely better than the Jag. So there is much more room in here. Steering wheel is pretty much where you want it. I've got room for my legs. I'm sitting a bit more upright, but that's not necessarily an issue. The gear change just feels like a truck gear change. I don't know what Alfa were thinking at the time. It's nice to use, but the travel on it is just so long. I've just got to hold it because it's vibrating like mad. I did think when I was going to take this car out, okay, well this is going to be a much more lithe, agile car than the E-Type. And indeed it is. But the steering is pretty heavy, so it takes away some of the sharpness, the extra sharpness that you expect to have. There's more precision there though, which is nice, which is welcomed. You don't have the slop around center that the E-Type has. The engine, the Alfa twin cam lump, is one of the all-time greats, and it is fantastic in this application as well. It's not as powerful as the E-Type. It doesn't sound quite as glorious as that inline 6, but for an inline 4, it's characterful, it's got its own personality, it's got nice torque low down, and we'll rev it through in a minute and see how it pulls. Interior wise, definitely not as luxurious as the E-Type, but it's still a nice interior. I quite like it. Functional. There's not as many switches and toggles to get confused by. Everything is kind of there, really, where you need it. The rev counter and the tacho there was a bit of moisture underneath them earlier. I think they're clearing up a little bit now. Definitely doesn't ride bumps as well as the E-Type, no way. Brakes though, more positive, more feel. Now there is one thing though about this car, and that is that the front right brake is binding. So I'm going to have to be a bit careful with how I use it, but let's pull it through. So really, quite slow, but that doesn't mean it's not fun. It's got a delicacy and a balance on the corners. It doesn't lean as much as the E-Type. And the engine maybe doesn't have a huge amount of power, but it's so willing, it loves to rev. 6.5 I was getting it up to there. It seems to stop pulling after that. The ride is really so much more unsettled, but I think that's down to the solid rear axle. Much happier in the corners. It just doesn't lean, and it does feel much more like a proper sports car. That rattle is so distracting. I don't know if you can hear it, but such a shame. And of course, 5th gear. So makes it for a bit more of a relaxed cruiser than it would be with that little engine buzzing away. The screen is quite a bit higher. You sit lower. It feels like you sit lower in the car just because I think the screen and the dash are higher. So as a convertible, it's better for someone of my height, because it protects you a bit more from all the wind, the buffeting and the noise. Absolutely love the body coloured dash, the 3 dials there for oil pressure, fuel, temperature, and the Nardi wheel, which is much higher up than on the E-Type. You really have to work the engine if you want to get anywhere. There isn't much power, but it's pretty smooth, so it's not too much of a chore really. Now that gearbox may be long throw, but it is positioned quite well, and you just kind of get used to it. It's great fun with the Duetto. It does feel very different from the E-Type. But in a way, you almost bond more with it because you have to work the car more. It's more of a one-to-one experience. It's more involving than the E-Type. That doesn't mean it's better or worse. You can't compare these two cars because they do things so differently. Unsurprisingly, the Duetto is definitely the more sporting car. The more fun car to drive fast, and it is pretty good. But the sense of occasion, the sound of the engine, the interior, the looks of that E-Type are something truly, truly special. Back in the day, if it was me and I'd tried both, I don't know what I would have done, because for someone who likes to drive quickly, the Alfa is the better choice. But the E-Type is just so much car. It is unbelievable. And for the money, for what it costs, it's just what it cost at the time. It's incredible. Nowadays, a Duetto is only about, it's about £50,000, whereas that E-Type that I've just driven is more like 150. So I don't know, if you were going to get a classic car, the fact that this is so much cheaper does have some appeal as well. Let me know what you think. Which one would you buy if you could go back in time? Thank you so much for watching. Thank you very much to Dana for supporting the video. Thanks to the guys for bringing the cars down. And I really look forward to seeing you for the next one. Please do subscribe if you haven't yet, because it really helps the channel.